Good evening, Asia. Good afternoon, Middle East, and good morning, Americas. Welcome back to AMN Academy, where for tonight we are going to talk about the most common topics in IELTS speaking. And joining me shortly is Sir Brian Martin Sioson of 9.09er English, who got, by the way, the perfect 9.0 in IELTS speaking. So, we would like to greet our live viewers for tonight. Kindly indicate your location. Where are you joining us from? Looking at the number of live viewers that we have 42 live viewers for tonight. Always remember that every first and third Monday of the month, it's the turn of 9.09er English to give you free lessons on various English examinations that are needed for you to work in the United States of America. And topping the list is IELTS International English Language Testing System because it's the only English examination accepted by literally all state boards of nursing in the United States. And then every third Monday of the month, which is actually now, I'm with Sir Brian for free lectures and info sessions. First Monday of the month, we are with the British Council to give you the latest updates on the examination plus a featured passer. So, Sir Brian, will you please greet our live viewers for tonight before we talk about the most common topics in IELTS speaking?
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining another session of AMN Healthcare International's free sessions on IELTS and various other options that you have. I hope that you'd also share this with your friends who are also planning to pursue their American dreams and also planning to take their English exams, particularly because tonight we're going to be talking about something that's really very important for your overseas application going to the USA, because speaking is of utmost importance when you're applying to go to the US. So, yeah, while probably Sir Irvin has already shared the link with our students. Welcome to another session here at AMN. We are always so grateful to be part of the roster of people who discuss here every once in a while. I'm so happy to be here, and let's enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sir Brian. So, just in case you are not available in the next 30 minutes because you're doing something else, or maybe you are at work or you're about to sleep, nothing to worry because everything that we're going to talk about for tonight is already in this book. This is the 9.09er IELTS speaking book. There are sample responses here, and this is available in the Philippines via Shopee, or if you're based in other countries, this is also available on Amazon. So, just in case you're not available to watch until the end of this live session, this book is just one click away. In Philippine pesos, this is around 649 pesos. And Sir Brian, how much does this book cost on Amazon, please?
Sir, I think it's just $9.99, $9.99. So you can grab a copy, so that you can, secure one even if you're overseas.
Great. Now let's take a look at some other responses of our live viewers. Now we have 60. Richmond is joining us all the way from Ghana. So if I'm not mistaken, it's around noon, maybe early afternoon in Ghana. So hi to our viewers from Africa. Noel greeted us. Good evening. Good evening to you as well, Noel. Please let us know where you are joining us from. And then Saif said, I'm a big fan of both of you. Learned much from your lectures. Currently watching from Kuwait. Thank you so much for the kind words. And well, if you've noticed, we don't do Facebook Live sessions regularly. So there is some sort of importance now for our Facebook Live sessions. Unlike before that, we do it literally 2 times a week or 3 times a week. Now we're just doing this twice a month. So we're hoping to gather more participants whenever Sir Brian goes live. So let's get right into it. Speaking is the most important subtest if you are going to the United States of America. Don't get me wrong, this Facebook Live session is not just for US bound applicants. This Facebook Live session is basically for anyone and everyone preparing for IELTS. It's just that This is the Facebook page of AMN Healthcare International, one of the largest and most generous agencies helping nurses go to the United States. That's why we are going to focus on the required band score for nurses, but it does not mean that only nurses can join us for tonight. So, if you'd like to work in the United States of America as a registered nurse, you have to get a 7 in speaking and 6.5 overall band score. This means to say, it doesn't really matter whatever grade you get for listening, reading, and writing as long as your overall band is 6.5. So the recommendation is to get around 6 in listening, reading, and writing, and then a 7 in speaking, because that will give you 6.5 overall band score. By the way, speaking is the only subtest that's not conducted together with the written exams. In other English examinations, speaking is part of the written exams. This means to say that everyone is inside the computer lab talking all at the same time. So for other English examinations, it might be distracting because you get to compete with the voices of other candidates. But in IELTS, it's just you and the examiner inside the speaking cubicle. That is, if your speaking test is face-to-face. But after the pandemic, 90% of the speaking examinations are already conducted via video call speaking. So this means to say 90% of the time, you're the only person in the room, and where is the examiner? Perhaps in another side of the world, and you can see your examiner via the computer. So, Sir Brian, let's talk about the 3 tasks in speaking. Let's begin with task 1. Sir Brian, what's task 1 all about?
Thank you, Sir Evin. IELTS Task 1 is your personal interview. So basically, the questions here are about yourself. So it's your personal introduction. The questions that are going to be asked are relative to or related to your personal experiences, your preferences, like what you like or what you dislike. Mainly, these are the questions that are going to be asked in the first part of the test. This is not so much like a job interview in which you're supposed to be providing the best responses in the world, but you should definitely have a good grasp of who you are as a person and what you really like and what you don't like. Like you have to be very self-aware in this part of the examination because the topics are of a good range. You don't really know what's going to come out in your examination, and it's very important that you really have preferences when you come into the examination. Yeah, there you go. That's part 1 of the test. Also, in the first part of the examination, the examiners are going to ask you a lot of questions. Actually, they have general questions and they just ask follow-up questions, and they have to cover a range of topics. The number of questions will be determined by the prompt. It is not an impromptu interview. Everything will be in the script, and the examiners will have to ask you all of those questions within the span of only 4 to 5 minutes. And that means to say that there are instances when you're talking too much, or when you have already spoken for a long time, that the examiners will cut you out and move on to the next question, asking you a different question altogether. And that's perfectly normal in the first part of your examination.
So, I'd like to give you an idea, guys. I took the IELTS. Sir Brian also took the IELTS. That's why we can share from our experience. Task 1, known as the introduction. This would usually last for about 5 minutes. So Sir Brian already mentioned that. When I took the examination, my examiner focused on 3 topics: home, food, and art. For each of the 3 topics, I was asked 3 questions each. So if you do the math, I was asked total of 9 questions already for the first 5 minutes. So how many seconds per question? Okay, 5 minutes. Multiply that by 60 seconds, that will give you 300 seconds. Divided by 9 questions, roughly, my examiner only allowed me to talk for about 33 seconds each. This means to say that you do not expect to finish your responses. While you're in the middle of it, your examiner might butt in, might interfere to throw the next question. And sometimes this might be a little discouraging for the candidate because the candidate at the back of his or her mind is saying, but wait a minute, I'm not yet done. Can't you allow me to finish? Sometimes people who are not familiar with how it goes in the actual examination might complain. But the thing is, examiners are required. The word is required to ask you up to 9 questions in just 5 minutes. This means that you will never really finish your answer. I, for one, was assigned to an examiner who kept on interrupting me. So that's when I thought, okay, maybe I'll just have to go direct to the point, be straightforward with my response in the first 30 seconds. So if the examiner is going to butt in, at least I was able to provide the most responsive answer in the first 30 seconds. What about you, Sir Brian? When you took the examination, was your examiner or did your examiner allow you to finish, or your examiner also kept on throwing or firing the questions at you?
Well, it's kind of intimidating when I took the examination and I got actually a Ven 9. That was a scary experience because the examiner had a very stern disposition and she was asking question after question after question, not allowing me to finish any of my responses. And she seemed very unimpressed with anything that I said and just cut me out every time. But, it's not really the look of your examiner or how your examiner actually appears when you're taking the examination that will determine your score. Sometimes they just don't want to show any kind of emotion when they're taking when they're facilitating the examination, but that doesn't mean to say they're going to give you a low score. Just make sure that you're confident and you're not phased even if you're asked a few difficult questions, and you just carry on even if the examiner cuts you out. I haven't really experienced in 3 attempts of the IELTS situation when I was allowed to finish any of my responses in part one of the test. Most of them just want to move on to the next question, get on with it, just finish all of the questions in the script, and that's it, basically.
I'm with Sir Brian because when he said that the examiner was very intimidating, I suddenly remembered my first examiner in the IELTS. So Sir Brian mentioned he took the examination 3 times, not because he failed in his first 2 attempts, but because he took one IELTS on paper, he took another IELTS on computer, and then for credibility's sake, he took another IELTS. And this time, it's post-pandemic. Now, in my case, I also took 2 IELTS. One with the British Council, one with IDP, and then one academic and one general training. You know what's consistent with my examiners, especially my first examiner? No reaction at all. Like, I'm trying to smile, I'm trying to be polite and all that. But my examiner was just looking at me and nodding. So I personally thought, oh my God, is this personal? But that's when I realized, while I was teaching the IELTS already, examiners interview up to 25 candidates in one day. Imagine if you're going to smile for 8 hours nonstop. That's going to be tiring, right? And their job is not to smile at you. Their job is not to make friends with you. Their job is to assess the quality of your English. So you have to understand, if it's their 8th hour of asking questions, maybe it's tiring for them to smile all the time. But once again, the facial expressions of the examiner won't determine the grade that you're going to get in the test. So if I were you, just focus on your responses regardless of the facial expressions of the examiner. So back when I took the examination, there's home, there's food, and then art. What about you, Sir Brian? Would you remember the topics that came out in your speaking task one?
My job, where I live, and what types of beverages I love drinking.
Guys, notice that these questions are personal, right? Like about my home, I was asked, what's your favorite part of your home? And then if you're going to add an extension to your house, what part or what kind of room would you like to add? Things like that. And then I was asked questions about food. Tell me something about a local dish. Tell me something about an exotic dish that you'd like to try. And then compare the food in your country and the food that you've tried abroad. Notice that most of these questions are personal because task one is considered what? Warm up round. The examiner does not want to ask conceptual questions immediately, especially when your brain has not warmed up yet. So nothing to worry. You won't be asked complicated topics in task one. And then my third topic, art. I was asked tell me something about a piece of art that you have seen when you went to a museum. And then I was also asked, what do you think of abstract art? So things like that will help you establish your momentum. Now,
Yeah.
let's ask Sir Brian if he can remember the specific questions that the examiner asked
Mhm.
in his first IELTS attempt before we move on to speaking task two.
Oh, well, those were very easy questions. The examiner was not intimidating at all the first time. But the questions were, do you work or are you a student? And how long have you been employed? What kind of job would you want to have in the future? And then she asked me about, I think, books. What kinds of books do you enjoy reading? What book would you like to read in the future? Do you enjoy fiction novels or uh, nonfiction books? And then she asked me about beverages. She said, "What is your favorite beverage? When was the last time you drank this beverage? And how often do you drink this beverage?" So those are the questions that I got for the first attempt of my
Guys,
IELTS.
you notice that these questions, rather, these topics are not related to each other, right? Like from home to food and then art. Now, if you're going to look at the slide that we have prepared here for you, most examiners ask questions about yourself, your hometown, and your job. And what we need you to do in the actual examination is try to be trivial. Say, for instance, if you're asked about yourself, don't give boring details that perhaps the examiner has heard for several years already. Think of something that's going to catch the attention of the examiner because remember, the first 2 minutes will make or break your performance. If the examiner does not find you interesting in the first 2 minutes, what's the point of the examiner trying to listen to you talking until the end of the speaking test? But if you're able to get the attention of the examiner in the first 2 minutes, most probably the examiner will be glued to you until the end. And just like that, you'll realize, oh, time's up. That's the end of the speaking test. Now, when you're asked about your hometown, some examiners would like you to compare and contrast your hometown then and your hometown now. Or questions like, how do you see yourself or how do you see your hometown evolving 10 years from now? And then questions related to job. Some examiners are likely to ask you, what is it that you like about your job? Are you satisfied with your job? If you'd like to do another job in the future, what job would that be? So it wouldn't really hurt if you prepare for questions that are typically asked during interviews because most probably this is part of the warm up process. Now, let's move on to speaking task two. Do we have the next slide for that, Sir Brian?
Certainly, Sir Irvin. Now, in the second part of the examination, you're going to be asked to talk about a particular topic for a couple of minutes. You have 1 minute preparation time in the second part of the test. So it's not really an impromptu speech, it's closer to an extemporaneous speech. When you have a bit of time to prepare what you're going to say, you will be given a piece of paper and a pencil where you can write some notes. And then after 1 minute, you will be asked to talk uninterruptedly, which means the examiner is not going to cut you out or butt in or stop you or ask follow up questions in the middle of you talking until you're done with your 2 minute discussion about the topic. Usually, the questions that you will receive will have a set of follow up questions, maybe three or four of them that you also need to answer within the 1 minute time that sorry within the 2 minute speech time that you will be provided in the examination. The topics are very relatable. They're very much concerned about your experiences or what you want to see or what you want to do in the future. And I think Sir Irvin would also confirm that a lot of the questions here relate to people in general and what they do, what occupations they have, what their individual preferences are, or what critical issues concerning humans are today. So these are very much related to the social life of people.
Sir Brian is absolutely correct. So, task two is what we call individual long term. Your examiner will give you a task card that contains a general question and some guide questions, usually three of them. This is the only time in the entire speaking test that you'll be allowed to prepare for your answer. Earlier, right after you are asked, you have to speak immediately. That's the nature of task one. But for task two, your examiner typically gives you a scratch paper and a pen. Yes, even for examination on computer, you're provided with scratch paper and pen in front of you. You're allowed to make an outline for 1 minute. And later, while you're talking for 1 to 2 minutes, you can use this outline, which will serve as your guide. So remember that for task one, everything runs for 5 minutes. But this time around, your examiner needs you to talk for a minimum of 1 minute and maximum of 2 minutes. So imagine the penalty that you're going to get if you fail to reach the first minute. That's why you have to do everything in your capacity to reach the second minute. That's your goal, ladies and gentlemen, the second minute. If the examiner is not yet done, or if the examiner does not tell you time's up, keep on providing more details until such time you reach the second minute. So it wouldn't really hurt if you ask yourself the five W's and one H to make your response longer. From our live audience, we have 60 for tonight. Will you please tell me what are the five W's and one H that you can ask yourself to make your responses long? So I'll give you a clue. I'll start with who. So please mention the other W's and one H that we are looking for. And while you are typing, let's take a look at the typical questions or the typical topics in IELTS Speaking Part 2. 1. Experience. Say, for instance, tell me something about an incident that made you happy. Or tell me something about an event when you came in late. Or tell me something about what you did last weekend. Typically, they are experiences, so they are not difficult to answer. Sometimes it would take you a few seconds to think of which specific event to share. Definitely, there is something for you to talk about because it's your experience, and you are not required to make it up. It's just a matter of identifying which of your personal experiences, which of your activities or the events in your life you're going to talk about. So, the sample I've shared with you, an event that made you happy. Number two, sometimes you're also asked about plans regarding the future. Say, for instance, tell me something about a party that you'd like to organize for someone in the future. Or tell me something about a country that you would like to visit. Or tell me something about a hotel that you'd like to stay at. So these are under the category of plans, anything related to the future. And we have another category, and Sir Brian mentioned this earlier. IELTS, most of the time, will ask you to talk about people. It could be, tell me something about a successful leader you would like to meet. Or tell me something about an athlete you aspire to be. Or tell me something about a happy couple whom you know. So guys, task two is not difficult, provided that you are exposed to the thousands of questions that could possibly come out in the IELTS. The only time this is difficult is when you're unfamiliar with the topic. That's why what does 9.09er do? We compile the most common questions that came out ever since I started teaching in 2006. And that's nearly 2 decades of database. We keep on adding new questions and we were able to come up with this book. Not just the questions, but also sample responses. That's why this is one of our best sellers, not just on Shopee, but also Amazon. So, Sir Brian, would you like to share the exact question that you encountered in your speaking task two for the benefit of our live audience for tonight?
Um, uh, in my first examination, the examiner asked me about an experience when oh, sorry, not an experience, but the very first time that I learned how to read a book. And then the second examination I took, the examiner asked me to talk about an item that I lost but I found eventually. What a very difficult question. You've lost something in able to find it. Wow. And then the third examination, who is a person whom you want to whom you want to work with in the future. So these are the questions. So I think the first one was about like an experience. The second one was more about like another experience perhaps, and then the third one was about a person. So it's absolutely correct, these are very common questions. Events and people, they're very very common in the examination, even the plans, because the question in my most recent examination was who was a person whom you want to work with in the future. So that's also a future plan. These are very common sources of questions in the second part of the test.
9.09er strategy for task 1 is different for task 2. Why? Because if in task 1 your examiner is not allowed to finish, will not allow you to finish your response, that's why you have to go direct to the point in task 1. But for task 2, your examiner wants you to be the most talkative person in the world, providing as many details as you can so that you're going to reach the second minute. So notice, same English examination, but different tip for task 1 and task 2. And that is a tip you can only get from pros. It's just appalling that sometimes people think, oh, I've been speaking in English since birth, so I can do this even without preparation. We do not necessarily enhance your English in just 1 week or 2 weeks, but definitely we can tell you what to expect and what not to expect in the actual examination. So thank you, AMN, for sponsoring the English review of the qualified applicants. And for those of you who have not started your IELTS journey, all you have to do is send AMN a message. You can visit their website, you can message them here on Facebook, you can also send an email. And once you're qualified, you'll be sent over to us without payment because AMN sponsors the review fee of the qualified applicants. And once you are sent to Niner, you get to enjoy daily one-on-one coaching and speaking, which is something that you cannot do on YouTube. Sometimes I know there are people looking for speaking buddies. Speaking buddies are good. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes your speaking buddy might not know your mistakes, or sometimes that speaking buddy of yours might be a little too shy to point out your errors or mistakes. This is what's good with the program of AMN for the dear nurses who are qualified. You're sent over to Niner. So IELTS passers, IELTS coaches who have been doing this for 5 years, 10 years are going to tell you in the actual examination, this is what to expect. So providing this kind of answer could be enhanced if you do it this way. And that's what 9.09er is all about. Now, before we move on to task 3, let's take a look at some of the comments of our 65 live viewers. Mel is watching for the first time. Hi, Mel. Agnes is from Nigeria. Greetings to our brothers and sisters in Africa. And then Julius is watching us from the Philippines, in particular, Cebu. Maayong gabi, Angeline is watching us from Negros Oriental. Our nearest branch is located in Bacolod, Negros. Matthew and Sheila, thank you so much for your response. Yes, ask yourself the following questions: who, when, where, why? And then you can also ask yourself how. Let's consider an event that made you happy. So, what event is this? When did the event take place? Where did the event take place? Why did this event make you happy? And then how did this make you feel? Something like that. The more you ask yourself these questions, the 5 W's and 1 H, for sure, the longer your response and the higher the probability that you are going to reach the second minute. So we also have other live viewers. We have May Ann, who is also watching us from Mindanao. Maayong gabi, Mindanao. And she is from Agusan. And we have Carl watching us from Parañaque. Guys, if you have questions regarding the IELTS speaking test, keep them coming because while Sir Brian and I are still here, we are going to answer your questions live. Now, Sir Brian, let's move on to arguably the most challenging part of the IELTS speaking test. That's task 3. So, Sir Brian, what's task 3 in IELTS speaking?
In the third part of the IELTS speaking examination, it's going to be identical to the first task in the way the examiners are going to ask you questions, but this is actually a discussion part in which questions can be a little bit more abstract or conceptual. So in the first part of the examination, the questions are very preferential, like what do you like to do you enjoy this, do you like this, do you like going out with friends or staying indoors. In the third part of the examination, examiners will be diving into and delving into deeper topics that will require a bit of explanation, critical thinking, analysis, and definitely a lot of argumentation sometimes, so that you can defend your stand and you can support your arguments. So, if I were to rank the three parts of the examination in terms of the brain power that you require for you to survive, it's the third part that will require most of the brain cells in your body to come out, probably because of the difficulty of the questions. And also, in this part of the examination, I feel it is the favorite part of a lot of the examiners for the reason that they're not scripted here. They ask you a few guided questions based off the script, but they can also ask you follow up questions or leading questions, even in the third part of your examination to challenge your mental faculties. So, reserve your energy and also your brains for the third part of the examination, because I know and there have been a lot of reports of candidates taking the third part and they just don't know like anything at all, or they can't say anything at all because they've run out of brains by the time that they get to the third part of the examination. So mental and physical stamina are required when you're taking IELTS generally.
Sir Brian is actually correct when he said that task 1 and task 3 are a lot similar to each other. Similar in a sense that task 1 and task 3 both last for about 5 minutes. Task 1 and task 3, no preparation time. Talk immediately after you are asked. Remember what I said earlier, the task 2 is the only part that you are allowed to prepare for an answer. But what makes task 1 and task 3 totally different from each other? The nature of questions. If for task 1, most of the questions are personal, this time around for task 3, most of them are conceptual questions or follow-up questions to whatever answers you have given in task 2. Depending on the time left, your examiner is likely to ask 3 to 5 follow-up questions in task 3. And most of the time, they allow you to talk for about 1 minute per question. And like task 1, do not expect to finish your responses here. If the examiner feels that he or she has heard enough, the examiner moves on and asks the next question. So what are the typical questions asked here? 1, compare and contrast. Say, for instance, differences between living in the city and living in the countryside. So this is not a personal question anymore. You can answer the question without saying, in my experience. This time, you are talking about something more, something broader, more general, not just yourself, not just your experience, but it could be shared experience of the community. Another type of question, which is very common in task 3, advantages and disadvantages. So our example here, working from home. Guys, in the actual examination, try not to make your task responses complicated, because most of the time they are going to be the basis of the examiner to ask you follow-up questions in task 3. The more you make it complex in task 2, the more you are inviting complicated follow-up questions. So we recommend to keep it simple. Don't try to impress the examiner. The examiner is not here for you to, the examiner is not here to be impressed. The examiner is going to assess or evaluate your level of proficiency in the English language. Now, we have another type of conceptual question here for task 3, and that's future consideration. Say for instance, what do you think is going to be the most popular mode of transportation 50 years from now? And because these questions are not personal, we would like to reassure you that your task 3 answers are in task 3 are not going to be judged morally by the examiner. There is no evaluation regarding your stand. Say, for instance, your examiner is going to give you a low mark if you do not agree with the examiner. No, nothing like that. And based on our experience, Examiners do not really care what your political view is. Don't try to be political in the actual examination, or your religious view does not matter at all. What matters most is that you're able to express yourself in correct English. Sir Brian, would you remember what questions you were asked in your task 3?
uh, I'd like to talk about my second examination. That was the time I got a good score, but the questions were insane. I was just asking the second part about an item that I lost that I eventually found. And then the examiner started asking me difficult questions. Like the first question was, why do people keep private collections? And I said something about like it has a personal connection to them that they can recall a lot of things, and then she challenged me and said, "But what about for things that they don't hold value? Why do they keep them?" And I was like, "What?" And then she asked me about why items that are kept in a private collection fetch higher prices in an auction. I was like, "Oh my gosh! Like I haven't been to an auction before." Why on earth am I being asked that question? And then she asked me about archaeology next and how important archaeology is in our country. And she then asked me about relics and artifacts, that whether they should be kept in museums or they should be kept where they were originally excavated. And I said that they should be kept in museums. And she said, but don't they lose their character if they're kept in a museum rather than their original um, excavation site? And, got me thinking a little bit there. And then finally, she asked me about, I think, how archaeology will move forward 50 years from now. And those were the questions. I cried after, but I did get a good score at the end. I had to eat 2 burgers after that examination, but anyway, got a good score nonetheless.
Ironically, that was the most difficult round of Sir Brian's speaking exam. However, that's also the speaking examination where he got the highest grade. Remember that Sir Brian mentioned he took the examination 3 times? So sometimes you'll never know. But the most difficult questions are only asked because the examiner feels you have what it takes to get the highest possible band score. The examiner is not going to argue with you if the examiner feels that you don't have what it takes. So I also remember because I took my examination twice, as mentioned, one with IDP, one with the British Council, one IELTS academic, and one IELTS general training. Ironically, the time I got a 9.0 in speaking was also when I was asked complicated questions. But when I took my second IELTS, that's when I got an 8.5 in speaking. I was asked super easy questions. Now, guys, you be the judge. So for my first examination, for my task 2, it's about body of water. So my follow-up questions in task 3 were all about body of water. And I was asked, do you think the government is doing enough to clean the water in your country? So I mentioned something, blah, blah, blah. And then cite a specific law applicable in your country that aims to clean the water. And I'm like, do I have to remember a certain Republic Act or a certain executive order? So all I did was to talk and talk and talk. I said, well, I cannot remember the specific Republic Act or the specific number, but during my high school years when I was an active environmentalist, I remember that there is a law, blah, blah, blah. It's just not being implemented. All we have to do is not to create laws anymore because we have a lot of them. We just need proper implementation from the government. And then this is when it got crazy because for task 3, I was asked, so tell me something about a research done in another country that aims to use salt water for drinking. And I was like, okay, I think there's this study once that was conducted in Japan, blah, blah, blah. And when I looked at my result, oh, wow, I got a 9.0 in speaking, even if the examiner asked me complicated questions. So I'm like, the more complicated the questions the examiner asks, the more the examiner thinks that you are capable of getting the highest grade in the examination. They only push you to your limits if they feel you can do it. It's like the coaches, right? Tough love. Sometimes they're hard on you, not because they don't care about you, but sometimes they just want to bring out the best in you. Now, compare that to my second examination. And this time, I was asked about let me recall what specific okay, this was when I was asked about a museum. So tell me something about a museum in your hometown. That's my task too. And then follow up questions like, what's the importance of opening the museum to international tourists? Or do you think museums should also be for entertainment? And lastly, I was also asked a question related to museum, like should museums be free of charge? I mean, those are way easier as compared to my first examination. But as you can see, I got an 8.5 in my second attempt, but a 9 in my first attempt. So sometimes, just because the examiner asks you easy questions does not guarantee that you will make it. Or just because you're on the brink of crying does not mean that you're going to fail the test. Remember, all you have to do is to focus on the question and make sure that your English is correct. So before I ask Sir Brian to share his last few words to our live viewers, let me just check some of the remaining comments. So Leia is also watching us from Mindanao. We have a lot of viewers from Visayas and Mindanao tonight. And then Tina is watching us from Saudi Arabia. Raymundo, like the others who watched earlier, is also from Mindanao. Maayong gabi, Bukidnon. Festus Deborah is watching us all the way from Ghana. And we have Fuamba watching us from Kenya. So most of our live viewers for tonight are from the Philippines, Middle East, and Africa. So we have shared with you actual examination questions and the common questions for that matter. Sir Brian, as someone who was able to get perfect 9.0 in each of the components of the IELTS speaking, listening, reading, and writing, your last few words, please, to our dear live viewers for tonight.
Well, I know that speaking can be a little bit of a challenge for a lot of people taking this test, particularly because you're not familiar with what's really going to happen. And it's not something that you do on a daily basis. But I can assure you that with practice and the right guidance, especially with our coaches here at 9.09, or you know that AMN actually sponsors your review or preparation for your English exam here at Niner, I'm sure that you're going to be able to clear your English examination, particularly the IELTS speaking test. It's not as hard as you think it is. It just needs a little bit of practice and self evaluation. And it's so extremely hard to practice by yourself because you will never know what level you're in or what you need to improve because you're always blindsided. And so it is so important to seek the advice of experts and ask them whether you're doing things the right way and what things you can modify or amend in your practices and in your strategies or techniques in taking the examination because uh, every person is different and what you don't have might be something that another person has and vice versa. You can't really force yourself to learn techniques that are not intended for you, and so everything needs to be tailored fit to your individual learning style and your individual way of speaking, and that we can definitely help you with here at 9.09er.
Thank you so much, Sir Brian. Now, last two things. Number one, we have a question here from II. Which one is better, paper-based or computer-based? Did you know that more than 80% of 9.09ers IELTS passers took computer-based examination? But why? Let me tell you 3 reasons. Number one, for IELTS on paper in Metro Manila, this is available only 2 times a month. Compare that to IELTS on computer, which is available literally almost every day. So in a month, compare IELTS on paper, 2 test dates, IELTS on paper, 2 test dates, IELTS on computer, 30. In the provinces, sometimes you have to wait for 3 months before the next available IELTS on paper test date. But for IELTS on computer, it's available every week in the province. Number 2, availability of results. If you're going to take IELTS on computer, the result is available the next day. But if you're going to choose IELTS on paper, you have to wait for 13 calendar days. So imagine the rigors of anxiety, nervousness for 13 sleepless nights just because your results are not yet released. No problem with that if you're going to take IELTS on paper because with just one night, voila, you can get your result the following day. And what about one skill retake? Now, if you're unhappy with your grade in one subtest, definitely you can go for one skill retake, which is available only for IELTS on computer. IELTS on paper does not offer one skill retake. And hopefully, with those insights I have shared, you're going to choose IELTS on computer. Not that I'm imposing you to take IELTS on computer. I'm just highlighting the advantages of IELTS on computer. And number two, don't forget that AMN Academy is available every Monday at 9 p.m. Philippine time. So, second and fourth Monday of the month, it's the turn of the NCLEX Review Center partners of AMN to talk about NCLEX. But if you're joining us every first and third Monday of the month, it's the turn of 9.09er English to give you free lessons on English exams. Every first Monday of the month, we are with the British Council to talk about the latest updates, and we feature a nurse who passed IELTS. And then, third Monday of the month, I'm usually with Sir Brian as we give live lectures like this one, IELTS Speaking Lecture. If you're not available on Monday night, don't worry because there is another show every Friday night, and that's Onwards and Upwards show. And before we end our discussion for tonight, if you know any nurse planning to pursue the American dream, don't look away. All you have to do is to visit the website of AMN Healthcare International or send them an email or send them a message and kickstart your journey to become a registered nurse in the United States of America. Once again, we are 9.09er English. Thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you in our next live session. Bye.